My name is Marcus Turrell. I was the chief engineer aboard the colony ship New Dawn. That title means nothing now. On this world, I'm specimen 4477. Classification: adult male human. Status: active study subject. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how 20,000 souls became experimental material for gods older than human civilization. The New Dawn was a dictator-class colony vessel, launched from the overpopulated hive world of Mordant Prime, with authorization from the Administratum to establish a frontier settlement in the Veiled region. Our mission was simple: find an unclaimed world, establish Imperial presence, begin resource extraction, and report back within 20 years. We had agriculturalists, engineers, miners, Medicaid personnel, children, elderly, a complete cross-section of humanity ready to build a new world. The ship's holds contained prefabricated structures, agricultural equipment, gene seed banks, everything needed for successful colonization. We never reached our assigned destination. 17 months into the journey, we hit a warp anomaly. The Gellerfield held, but the navigators lost their lock on the Astronomicon. When we emerged from the Imperium, we were catastrophically off course, our position unknown, our astropathic choir dead from the psychic backlash. And we were falling. The warp translation had occurred inside a planet's gravity well, a navigational impossibility that nonetheless was happening. The New Dawn, never designed for atmospheric entry, began breaking apart the moment we hit the upper atmosphere. I was in engineering when the hull breaches began. The screaming of tearing metal, the hurricane roar of atmospheric entry, the alarms wailing across every deck. I sealed the bulkheads, diverted all remaining power to the forward sections, where most civilians were sheltering, and prayed to the Emperor. The New Dawn crashed at dawn. The impact killed 12,000 people instantly. The forward sections crumpled like paper. The mid-decks sheared away completely, their remains scattered across 100 kilometers. The aft sections, my section, hit hardest, but remained mostly intact. I woke 3 hours later in the medical bay, hastily established in a cargo hold. My left arm was broken, my ribs cracked, my face covered in lacerations from flying debris. But I was alive. 8,000 of us were alive. The planet's governor, a title he'd held for all of 6 hours, was Captain Helena Morse of the ship's command crew. She'd survived with a crushed pelvis and burns across 40% of her body, but her mind was sharp. "We're stranded," she told the assembled survivors that first night. We'd gathered in the largest intact cargo hold, huddled together under emergency lighting. The astropathic choir is gone. The warp drive is slag. We have no faster-than-light communication and no way off this world. The silence was absolute. "But," she continued, her voice strengthening, "we're alive. The planet has a breathable atmosphere. Nitrogen-oxygen mix, slightly higher oxygen content than standard. Initial surveys show water sources, mineral deposits, arable soil. We came here to colonize. That mission hasn't changed. We simply have a different world than planned." "What about rescue?" someone called out. "The Administratum will look for us." "Eventually," Morse acknowledged, "but we were 17 months into a journey to the frontier. It could be decades before anyone realizes we're missing. We need to assume we're on our own." She wasn't wrong. The Imperium of Man spans 1,000,000 worlds. A single colony ship, lost in the vastness of space, would be a footnote in some administrative record. We'd be declared lost to the warp, and another ship would be dispatched in a century or two. We were alone. We named the settlement Colony Hope. Not particularly creative, but after surviving the crash, hope was the most valuable commodity we had. The first months were brutal but purposeful. We salvaged everything usable from the New Dawn's wreckage. Hull plates became building materials, the reactor was carefully extracted and repurposed for the colony's power grid. Hydroponics bays were relocated intact. The planet, we'd started calling it New Dawn after the ship, seemed almost providential in its hospitality. Gravity was 0.92 standard. The day-night cycle was 26 hours. The temperature range was comfortable. We found no evidence of dangerous predators, no toxic plants, no lethal microorganisms. It was as if the planet was waiting for us. I should have questioned that. We all should have. I was assigned to the excavation teams. We needed to dig foundations for permanent structures, establish underground water reservoirs, create storage facilities. The work was hard but satisfying. We were building something, creating a future. Month 6. I'll never forget that day. We were excavating for the primary water treatment facility, digging 15 meters down into the rust-colored soil. The excavator's drill hit something with a metallic clang that echoed across the entire worksite. "Stop!" I shouted. "Full stop!" The excavator operator, a woman named Yana Cross, powered down immediately. We gathered around the hole, peering down. Metal. Not ore, not a natural formation. Worked metal, formed into geometric patterns, the surface completely uncorroded despite being buried. Could be from the ship, someone suggested, a piece that flew further than we thought. The New Dawn was Imperial construction, I said, running my hand over the surface. Crude, functional. This is different. Look at these angles, this precision. We excavated carefully, expanding the hole, following the metal structure. Within hours, we'd uncovered enough to understand. This wasn't debris. This was architecture. We'd built Colony Hope on top of something buried. Governor Morse arrived that evening with a full survey team. We illuminated the excavation site with portable lumens, and in their harsh white light, the structure looked even more alien. "How far down does it go?" she asked. "We don't know," I admitted. Ground-penetrating radar is giving strange readings. There's something down there, something large, but the density is wrong. It's like the structure exists in multiple phases. Xenos? Her hand went to her sidearm. I don't know what else it could be. But it's old, very old. The depth of the soil layer alone suggests millions of years. She stared into the pit for a long moment. Then, "We continue excavating. Carefully. If this is a Xenos ruin, we need to understand what we've built our colony on top of. If there's technology, resources, anything we can salvage, we need it, but weapons, ready, safety protocols. First sign of danger, we seal this site." We dug for 3 more days. We found the entrance on the 3rd day. A massive doorway, perfectly rectangular, 20 meters tall and 10 wide. The door itself was gone or had never existed. Beyond was darkness that our lumens couldn't fully penetrate. "I'm going in," Morse said. "Perhaps, Governor, I should go first," I argued. "You're too valuable." "I'm going in," she repeated, "because I need to see with my own eyes what we're dealing with. You're coming with me, along with a full security team." 10 of us entered the structure. 9 returned. The interior was a chamber, vast, cathedral-sized, its walls covered in geometric patterns that hurt to look at too long. The patterns seemed to shift when viewed peripherally, creating an optical illusion of movement. Glyphs covered every surface, rendered in a language that had no human equivalent. And the glyphs were watching us. I don't mean metaphorically. The glyphs, their angular, precise shapes, they oriented toward us as we moved. If you stood still, they'd slowly rotate to point at you. It was subtle, easy to dismiss as tricks of the light. But it wasn't. "Emperors protect us," someone whispered. "Lights everywhere," Morse ordered. "Document everything. We're not staying long." The chamber was empty. No furniture, no equipment, no remains. Just walls of living glyphs and a floor so perfectly level it seemed to deny the existence of imperfection. Surveyor Mira Chen was documenting the far wall when she stopped moving. "Chen?" I called. "You all right?" She didn't respond. She stood motionless, her hand still holding the picture, her eyes locked on the glyphs. "Chen!" I approached her, grabbing her shoulder. "Mira, respond!" She blinked, suddenly gasping as if surfacing from deep water. "Sorry, I don't know what happened. I was looking at the patterns and then it felt like they were looking back." "We're leaving," Morse decided. "Now. This place isn't safe." We retreated to the surface. 9 of us emerged. We'd entered with 10. "Where's Hendricks?" someone asked. Security Officer Dav Hendricks. He'd been at the rear of our group. None of us had seen him fall behind. None of us had heard him call out. He'd simply vanished between the chamber and the entrance. We searched for 6 hours. We found no trace, no blood, no scuff marks, nothing to indicate he'd ever been there. Morseled the excavation site that night. Armed guards posted around the perimeter, no one in or out without explicit authorization. "We continue building the colony," she announced. "But carefully. This world has secrets. We need to respect that." Respect. As if we had any choice. Month 7 began with disappearances. Mira Chen vanished during a night shift at the atmospheric processing station. She had been cataloging readings at 0300 hours. At 03:15, her station was empty. Her equipment was still running. Her half-finished ration bar was still on the console. She was gone. Search parties found nothing. We scoured the surrounding kilometers, checked every building, every tunnel, every possible location. Mira had vanished as completely as Hendricks. Predators, someone suggested. Maybe the planet does have dangerous fauna, we just haven't encountered them yet. It was a comforting lie. We embraced it. Month 8. The disappearances accelerated. 12 colonists vanished over 4 weeks. Always at night. Always without struggle, without evidence, without witnesses. People would be working one moment and gone the next. We established buddy systems, patrol schedules, mandatory check-ins every 15 minutes. It didn't help. The disappearances continued. Panic began spreading through Colony Hope. People refused to work night shifts. Parents kept children close at all times. The armed security forces were stretched thin, trying to protect a terrified population from an enemy that left no trace. Then Mira returned. She walked into Colony Hope at dawn on the 53rd day of month 8. She was naked, her body covered in a fine metallic sheen that caught the morning light. Her movements were wrong, too precise, too measured, as if she'd been taught to walk by someone who'd only read about walking in technical manuals. She didn't speak, didn't respond to her name. She walked directly to the colony's central communications array, our primary Vox system salvaged from the new dawn. She placed both hands on the transmission panel, and she broadcast. The sound that came from every speaker in the colony wasn't language as humans understood it. It was mathematics, pure complex equations expressed as tone and rhythm. It lasted 17 seconds. Then Mira collapsed. Medicaid teams rushed to her. They confirmed what we could all see. She was dead, had probably been dead for some time. The autopsy revealed horrors. Her tissues were infiltrated with metallic growths, microscopic threads of an unknown material that had woven through her muscle fibers, her nervous system, even her brain. Her organs showed signs of precise dissection and crude reassembly. She'd been opened, examined, and closed with a precision beyond human capability. Someone had studied her, then returned her to deliver a message we couldn't understand. That night, the world changed. They rose at midnight. One moment, the colony was quiet, just the normal sounds of human habitation and the distant hum of generators. The next moment, figures materialized from underground. They phased into reality like ghosts becoming solid. Dozens of them, then hundreds, emerging from beneath Colony Hope's foundations. They were machines shaped like skeletal warriors, metal bones gleaming with an inner green luminescence that hurt to witness. The Necrons had awakened. They didn't attack immediately. They simply stood there, surrounding the colony, thousands of mechanical soldiers in perfect formation. They were ancient. You could feel it in their presence. the weight of millions of years pressing down on human consciousness. Then they spoke. The sound came from our Vox systems, our communication devices, every speaker in the colony. A voice like grinding stone, like the death of stars, speaking in mangled Gothic. This, ours, you, trespass, our, untrampled, you, trespass. Governor Morse had armed security mobilize immediately. 50 colonists with las guns, autoguns, whatever weapons we'd salvaged from the ship. They formed a defensive line at the colony's perimeter. This is a human settlement, Morse broadcast through the Vox. We claim this world by right of discovery. We mean no. The Necrons opened fire. House weapons. I'd never seen them before that moment. I'd never seen a human being flash into atomic vapor, their skeleton remaining for a split second before collapsing into dust. 30 colonists died in 5 seconds. 30 people vaporized by emerald lightning that left only bones as evidence they'd existed. The Necrons stopped firing. They stood in silence, weapons lowered, waiting. The message was clear. They could kill us all effortlessly. They were choosing not to, for now. That was when I understood the true horror of our situation. We hadn't discovered an empty world. We'd invaded a tomb, and the dead had awakened to find vermin nesting in their crypt. Month 9, the month we learned the truth of our existence. The Necron overlord made contact at dawn. It manifested in the center of Colony Hope, phasing into reality with a sound like reality itself, tearing. It stood 4 meters tall, its skeletal frame adorned with elaborate metallic plating that pulsed with malevolent green light. Where the warrior Necrons had empty eye sockets, this thing had eyes, burning emeralds that fixed on each human it observed. Governor Morse approached it, weaponless, walking with the support of a crutch he'd been using since the crash. If she felt fear, her voice didn't betray it. I am Governor Helena Morse of Colony Hope. We are human settlers from the Imperium of Man. We crashed here by accident. We mean no intrusion. The Overlord's head turned toward her with mechanical precision. When it spoke, the voice emerged from the air itself, psychically transmitted and simultaneously broadcast through our Vox systems. The Gothic was fractured, ancient, as if spoken by something that had learned human language from broken recordings. You, primitive biological, short-lived. Yes, Morse acknowledged. We're human. This world had no markers, no signals. We didn't know it was claimed. Ignorance, not excuse. The Overlord gestured with a massive war scythe that crackled with disintegration energy. This, Earl, tomb, world, designated 37 million solar cyclists, past 37 million years. The number was incomprehensible. Humanity had existed as a spacefaring species for 30,000 years at most. This machine was claiming ownership, predating human evolution. We have nowhere else to go, Morse said quietly. Our ship is destroyed. We have no means of leaving this world. If you want us gone, you'll have to kill us. We can't leave. The Overlord stared at her for a long moment. Its mechanical mind was processing, calculating, deciding our fate. Study, material. The words were delivered with cold precision. You, primitive, biological, evolution, recent, study, required. You, stay, obey, live, resist, perish. Study? I asked, stepping forward despite every survival instinct screaming at me to stay silent. You want to study us? The Overlord's gaze shifted to me. Being observed by those burning green eyes was like being dissected while conscious. Species, data, collection. You, specimens, understand. I understood. We weren't colonists anymore. We weren't settlers or citizens or people. We were experimental subjects. What choice do we have? Morse asked, and there was defeat in her voice. None. The Overlord's response was instant. Obey. Restrictions. Designated. Zones. Human. Permitted. Forbidden. Zones. Necron. Territory. Xivolation. Extermination. Collection. Times. Established. Humans. Selected. Study. Returned. If possible. Resistance. Extermination. Colony. Understand? We understand, Morse said quietly. The Overlord turned away, already dismissing us. Compliance. Expected. Non-compliance. Punished. You. Exist. Because we permit. Purpose phased out of reality, leaving us standing in the morning light, our colony transformed into a prison. That afternoon, Morse assembled every colonist in the central square. 8,000 faces looked at her, hoping for leadership, for salvation, for something that would make sense of our nightmare. She gave them truth instead. The beings that control this world are called Necrons, she said, her voice amplified by voxcasters. They're a machine race that claimed this planet millions of years before humanity existed. We crashed on their tomb world. They've awakened because of our presence. Murmurs of fear rippled through the crowd. They've given us terms. We're to stay in designated zones. We're forbidden from entering their tomb complexes, and periodically they will collect us for study. They call us specimens. They view us as research material. Can we fight them? Someone shouted. Morse gestured to the 30 piles of bone dust at the colony's perimeter. They vaporized 30 armed colonists in seconds. They could exterminate us all in minutes. Fighting isn't an option. What about escape? Sending a distress signal? The nearest Imperial world is 30 light-years away, according to our last known position. We have no astropaths, no faster-than-Hawk communication. Any distress signal we broadcast will take 30 years to arrive. Even if help is sent immediately, rescue would take decades. The silence was crushing. So, we're prisoners, someone said quietly. We're survivors, Morse corrected, and we will continue surviving. We'll follow their rules. We'll adapt, and we'll protect each other as much as possible. That's all we can do. The Necrons established the boundaries that same day. We were permitted to occupy the surface structures of Colony Hope, roughly 4 square kilometers. We could use the agricultural zones we'd established, the water treatment facilities, our residential areas. Everything else was forbidden. They erected markers, obelisks of the same uncorroded metal we'd found in the excavation, each inscribed with glyphs that literally hurt to read. Crossing beyond those markers meant death. 3 colonists tested that rule in the first week. They died instantly, reduced to atomic vapor by automated defense systems. The first collection came 1 week after the Overlord's announcement. They arrived at dawn, a squad of Necron warriors accompanied by a single Cryptek, a specialist unit whose purpose we didn't yet understand. The Cryptek pointed at 10 colonists seemingly at random. Celebrated. For study. Come. The 10 colonists didn't move. They huddled together, parents pulling children close, people backing away in terror. The Cryptek's eye lenses flared. Resistance, not permitted. One of the Necron warriors raised its Gauss weapon. The message was clear. The 10 colonists walked forward voluntarily. What choice did they have? I watched them disappear into the tomb complex, escorted by the Necrons. I watched from the colony's edge, impotent, furious, terrified. 6 returned 3 days later. They were changed. 2 had metallic plates grafted onto their skin. Crude, painful-looking surgery that had fused Necron technology with human flesh. 1 had lost all his hair, his scalp covered in geometric scarring. Another couldn't speak properly anymore. Her voice came out in binary chirps and mathematical sequences. All 6 had eyes that had seen something incomprehensible. "They took us apart," one whispered when the medici examined her. Her name was Sala, a former agricultural tech. Carefully, precisely, they removed organs, studied them, put them back. They're learning how we work. "Did they hurt you?" the medici asked. "Yes, but not from cruelty. They don't understand pain. To them, we're machines that happen to be biological." "They're studying our components." 4 colonists hadn't returned. We never saw them again. The collections continued weekly. Always 10 to 15 colonists. Always random selection, though we started noticing patterns. The Necrons seemed interested in specific demographics. They collected pregnant women to study gestation. They collected children to study development. They collected the elderly to study aging. We were a complete biological data set for them. Year 1, 365 days of captivity. 365 days of adapting to horror. I kept count in a journal I maintained on salvaged data slate. I documented everything. The collections, the returns, the changes in Necron behavior. If we ever escaped, if the Imperium ever found us, they needed to understand what had happened here. The colony had developed routines around the collections. We'd learned which Necrons were safer. The warriors were mechanical, predictable. They'd only kill if you violated rules. The cryptechs were the dangerous ones, intelligent, curious, capable of improvisation. If a cryptech selected you, your chances of returning unharmed decreased significantly. Support groups formed among returned colonists. People who'd been taken, studied, violated. They found solace in shared trauma. I attended those meetings sometimes, even though I hadn't been collected yet. "They don't see us as alive," one man said during a session. His name was Torvald, a former miner. He'd been taken twice. His right arm was partially mechanized now, fused with Necron components in what appeared to be an experiment in biomechanical integration. "We're specimens, like insects pinned in a collection. They observe us, document us, learn from us, but they don't hate us. They don't even dislike us. We're just interesting." "Is that supposed to be comforting?" someone asked bitterly. "No," Torvald said quietly. "But understanding them helps you survive the studies. If you fight, they restrain you more thoroughly. If you struggle, the procedures take longer. If you stay calm, accept it, they finish faster and return you quicker." It was horrifying advice. Pragmatic, sensible, and absolutely horrifying. Governor Morse tried to negotiate better terms. She would stand at the boundary markers when the cryptechs came for collections and attempt to bargain. "Take me instead," she'd offer. "Leave the children. I'm older, more developed, better study material." The Necrons never responded. They took who they wanted. 15 months into captivity, they took me. I was working on the water treatment facility when the cryptech appeared. It was alone. Unusual. Most collections involved multiple Necrons. This one simply materialized beside me and spoke in its grinding psychic voice. "You, selected, study, required." I didn't run. Running was pointless. I set down my tools carefully and turned to face it. "What will you do to me?" Extract. Data. Biological. Analysis. Consciousness. Study. You. Return. If viable. And if I'm not viable. Data preserved regardless. It meant if I died during study, they'd at least keep the information they extracted. Comforting. The cryptech led me into the tomb complex. The entrance was the same chamber we'd discovered during excavation, the vast space with watching glyphs. Now I understood the glyphs weren't decorative. They were sensors, monitoring systems, part of the Necron technology that permeated this world. We descended through tunnels that went impossibly deep, the walls lined with dormant Necron warriors standing in alcoves, millions of them waiting for activation. We'd built our colony on top of an army. The examination chamber was clinical. That's the only word for it. A metal table, restraints, devices whose functions I couldn't identify. The cryptech gestured for me to lie down. I complied. Fighting would only make it worse. The restraints closed over my wrists and ankles. Not cuffs, but energy fields that held me immobile without touching my skin. The cryptech loomed over me, its mechanical fingers extending instruments that descended toward my skull. "This will hurt," I said. Not a question. Irrelevant. The first probe entered my temple. I felt it pierce skin, pierce bone, enter my brain. The pain was extraordinary, a violation of the most fundamental level. But worse than the pain was what came next. My memories erupted, not like remembering, like living them again at accelerated speed. My childhood on Mordant Prime flashed past in seconds. My technical training, my recruitment to the New Dawn, my marriage, my wife's death during the crash. Every moment of my 41 years experienced again in compressed time. The cryptech was reading my mind like data from a cogitator, extracting my entire consciousness, copying it, analyzing it. I screamed. I couldn't help it. The violation was total. It lasted 6 hours. When the cryptech finally withdrew the probes, I was sobbing, my throat raw from screaming, but I was alive, intact, physically undamaged except for the small holes in my temples that would scar. Study. Complete. Specimen. Viable. Return. Permitted. The cryptech released me. I stumbled from the table, barely able to walk. "What did you learn?" I asked hoarsely. "Human. Consciousness. Pattern. Recorded. Emotional. Response. Documented. Memory. Formation. Analyzed. Adequate. Data. Collected." That's all? I was just data? The cryptech's eye lenses flared. Affirmative. You may depart. I walked back to Colony Hope through the tunnels, past the dormant armies, past the watching glyphs. I emerged at dawn to find other colonists waiting, people who'd been taken before, who understood. They didn't speak. They just helped me to the medical bay. I'd survived my first study. 17 more awaited me over the next 8 years. Year 2 of captivity. The colony had shrunk to 3,000 souls. Not all deaths were Necron-caused. That was important to understand. The Necrons weren't exterminating us. They were studying us. But humans were dying anyway. Despair was the greatest killer. People who'd lost too much, who couldn't adapt to our new reality, they simply stopped. Some walked beyond the boundary markers deliberately, choosing instant vaporization over slow horror. Others took their own lives in quieter ways. Overdoses of medical supplies, hanging, simply refusing to eat until their bodies failed. Governor Moores documented every death. She kept records, maintained lists, ensured that everyone who died had their name recorded. It was a small dignity in an undignified existence. "We have to remember," she told me once. We were in her office, a converted storage container that served as the colony's administrative center. "We have to remember that we were people, not just specimens. Even if the Necrons see us as data, we need to see each other as human." I respected her for that. For maintaining structure, maintaining civilization in the face of impossible circumstances. But structure couldn't stop the collections. The Necrons came weekly, sometimes twice weekly. They took their specimens, conducted their studies, returned most of them. The colony had learned to function around the trauma. Children born before the crash were growing up now. They were 8, 9, 10 years old. They'd spent a third of their lives under Necron observation. They didn't remember Earth, didn't remember the Imperium. To them, this was normal. That was almost more horrifying than the studies themselves. I watched a child, A girl named Lissa, maybe 9 years old, explained to a younger child what to expect during collection. "They take you underground," she said matter-of-factly. "The metal people. They put you on a table and use tools. It hurts, but they bring you back, most times. Just stay calm and it ends faster." This was education on Colony Hope, teaching children how to survive vivisection. Some colonists tried to escape. Year 2, Month 4. A group of 15 people led by a former ship's officer named Kane salvaged one of the New Dawn's shuttles from the crash site. They'd been working on it in secret for months, repairing systems, gathering fuel, planning. They launched at midnight, hoping to escape the planet and reach an Imperial world, or at least get far enough to send a distress signal without Necron interference. The Necrons let them launch. The shuttle cleared the atmosphere, achieved low orbit, began accelerating toward the system's edge. Then a beam of light, emerald green, impossibly bright, lanced from the planet's surface. It struck the shuttle with perfect precision. The craft didn't explode. It simply ceased to exist. Matter converted directly to energy, a brief new sun in orbit. 15 people vaporized in an instant. We watched from Colony Hope's central square. The Necrons had ensured we could see. They wanted the lesson clear. You don't leave. After that, escape attempts stopped. We were trapped as surely as if we were in chains. The Necron's studies began evolving. Initially, they'd focused on basic biology, anatomy, physiology, how human bodies functioned. By year 2, they were exploring more complex topics. They became fascinated by reproduction. Pregnant women were collected more frequently. The cryptex would perform non-invasive scans, monitoring fetal development, tracking growth patterns. When women gave birth, Necron observers would be present, documenting the process. It was violation of the most intimate kind, but refusing wasn't an option. A woman named Ilara gave birth in year 2, month 8. She had been pregnant when we crashed, giving birth to her son in this nightmare. The delivery occurred in the colony's medical bay with human midwives, but 3 Necron warriors stood watch, their eye lenses recording everything. Ilara wept through the entire birth, not from pain, but from shame. From the horror of bringing a child into existence under the gaze of machines. Her son was healthy. The Necrons took tissue samples within hours, a small needle insertion that the infant barely felt. Then they left. "They're studying human development," the chief medicae explained later. "Infancy, childhood, adolescence. They want to understand our entire life cycle. Every baby born here is a specimen from birth." Year 3. Children born after the crash now outnumbered crash survivors. 27 babies born into captivity who would never know freedom. My daughter was one of them. The mother was Salah, the agricultural tech who'd been taken in the first collection. We'd found comfort in each other. 2 broken people seeking momentary respite from horror. Neither of us had planned for a child. But when Salah told me she was pregnant, we made a decision. We'd bring our daughter into this world. We'd give her whatever life we could. Because the alternative was admitting the Necrons had won, that they'd reduced us to mere specimens who didn't deserve to propagate. My daughter was born on the 3-year anniversary of our crash. We named her Eleanor, after Governor Morse's first name. The Necrons collected tissue samples within 6 hours. They were gentle as machines could be, but watching them insert needles into my newborn daughter's tiny body was the most powerless I'd ever felt. Elena was healthy. She grew normally, developing as any human infant would. The Necrons observed periodically but didn't interfere. Salah and I raised her as best we could in our converted cargo container home. We told her stories about Earth, about the Imperium, about a galaxy beyond this tomb world. We taught her that humans were more than specimens, that we had value beyond data. I don't know if she understood, but we tried. Year 3, Month 9. An event that shattered our remaining hope. Long-range sensors, salvaged from the New Dawn and maintained for exactly this purpose, detected ships entering the system, Imperial ships. A Astra Militarum fleet, 6 vessels, including a Luna-class cruiser. A distress signal had reached someone. They'd come for us. Colony Hope erupted in celebration. People wept, embraced, thanked the Emperor. We were saved. After 3 years of captivity, the Imperium had found us. Governor Morse immediately broadcast on all Imperial frequencies. This is Colony Hope, survivors of the colony ship New Dawn. We are stranded on the 4th planet. We number 3,000 souls. We are under Xenos threat. Please respond. The fleet responded. A clipped military voice. New Dawn survivors, this is Captain Holst of the 47th Cadian Regiment. We received your distress signal. Stand by for planetary assault. We're coming to get you. The fleet began deploying. Drop pods launching, atmospheric fighters descending, a full military extraction. We watched from the colony, hope surging for the first time in years. Then the planet responded. The Necrons had been dormant throughout the fleet's approach, allowing them to enter orbit unmolested. Now, the tomb world activated. Structures rose from beneath the planet's surface. Massive pylons that emerged from the ground with grinding mechanical precision. They'd been buried beneath us the entire time, weapon systems on a planetary scale. They fired. Lousy beams, but magnified beyond anything we'd seen. Lances of emerald lightning that reached from surface to orbit in milliseconds. They struck the Imperial fleet with devastating accuracy. The Luna-class cruiser's void shields collapsed in seconds. The hull beneath vaporized, the ship breaking apart in orbit. Escort vessels attempted evasive maneuvers, futile against weapons that adjusted trajectory at the speed of light. 6 ships died in 6 hours. We watched our rescue burn in the sky, watched drop pods falling like meteors, their contents Braveguard soldiers coming to save us, already dead or dying. Watched the debris rain down across the planet. The Necrons hadn't deployed their armies. Hadn't needed to. They'd simply activated a fraction of their planetary defense systems and erased an Imperial fleet. That night, the Overlord appeared in Colony Hope's center. Rest queue. Attempt destroyed. Lesson clear. Imperium cannot save you. You remain. Specimen study continues. Remain. Continued. Vanished, leaving us with the burning wreckage visible in the night sky. The psychological impact was devastating. That had been our hope, that the Imperium, vast and powerful, could save us. That hope was ash now, literally falling from the sky. Suicide spiked. 20 people in the following week. Moores instituted constant watches, counseling, mandatory group sessions. But you couldn't counsel away despair this deep. I held Alina that night, watching the sky burn. She was 6 months old, staring up at the lights with infant curiosity. "I'm sorry," I whispered to her. "I'm so sorry you were born into this." Sala embraced us both. "She's alive. That's something. That's more than nothing." Was it? I didn't know anymore. Year 5. The colony stabilized at around 2800. We'd stopped shrinking, found an equilibrium between births and deaths. Life continued. Brutal, traumatic, but continuing. The Necron studies had become routine. You lived your life, worked your assignments, raised your children. And periodically you were collected, examined, and returned. It was normal now. Horror had become mundane. Had been collected 6 times by year 5. Each time the cryptex probed deeper, studied more invasively. They were building a complete map of human consciousness, using me and hundreds of others as their subjects. My body bore the marks, scars on my temples, my chest, my arms, places where they'd extracted tissue, inserted probes, conducted experiments. I looked like a veteran of wars I'd never fought. Elena was collected for the first time when she was 2 years old. They came for her at dawn. The cryptech pointed at her specifically. Juvenile, female, specimen, required. Sala tried to bargain. Take me instead, please. She's so young. Juvenile. Development. Study. Required. Specimen selected. I had to pry Elena from Sala's arms. My daughter was crying, terrified of the metal giants. I carried her to the cryptech, handed her over, and watched them take her into the tomb complex. She was gone for 4 hours. When they returned her, she was physically unharmed. Just a few small marks where they'd taken samples. But she was changed. Silent, staring. She didn't cry anymore. She'd seen something that had shocked her into silence. It took 3 days before she spoke again. When she did, her first words were, "The metal people looked inside my head." That was Elena's introduction to her life's reality. She was 2 years old, and she'd been vivisected by machines older than human civilization. This was normal on Colony Hope. Year 8 approached. I'd been a specimen for 8 years, collected 17 times. My consciousness had been extracted, analyzed, and copied more times than I could count. Portions of my memory were missing, not damaged, but copied and removed, leaving gaps I couldn't explain. I was 49 years old. I'd spent nearly a fifth of my life as a lab rat. Elena was 5, growing into a bright, curious child who'd never known freedom. She played with other children born in captivity, creating games that incorporated their reality. Specimen collection was a common game, children pretending to be Necrons examining each other. It was heartbreaking and necessary. They were adapting to survive. The Necrons began a new phase of study in Year 8. They started processing humans more invasively. Some colonists taken for collection returned, changed, not just scarred or sampled, but fundamentally altered. They had Necron components grafted into their bodies, not as crude experiments, but as deliberate augmentation. Living metal fused with human flesh, creating hybrid beings. These processed humans were different. They spoke in binary occasionally. They responded to Necron commands. They seemed to exist halfway between human and machine. They were full of angst. Primarily, they seemed pathologically immobile. The Necrons called them something in their language that roughly translated to flesh data bridges. We just called them the Lost Ones. They weren't hostile. They weren't enemies, but they weren't fully human anymore either. They existed in a liminal space, serving as intermediaries between biological and mechanical existence. 30 colonists had been processed by Year 8, Month 6. They formed their own community within Colony Hope, not quite accepted by fully human survivors, not quite Necron. One of them, a man named Torin, who'd been processed in Year 7, tried to explain. They're trying to understand consciousness, the bridge between biological thought and mechanical processing. We're experiments in that bridge. It doesn't hurt. I can still think, still feel, but I can also interface with their systems, understand their language. I exist in both worlds. Do you want to stay human? I asked. He paused, his partially mechanical face struggling with an expression. I don't know if I have that choice anymore. Year 8, Month 11. I was selected for final study. The cryptech that came for me was different from the others. Older, more elaborate, its frame adorned with glyphs and devices that indicated higher status. Specify. 4477, selected, final, study, consciousness, extraction, complete, preservation, required. I understood immediately. This wasn't another examination. This was termination. You're going to kill me, I said. Lemon-colored fields evoke I, logical. Measure the value, distinction. I understand. I turned to find Sala in the crowd of colonists that had gathered. She was holding Elena, our 5-year-old daughter, staring at me with wide eyes. I approached them. Sala was crying silently. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "I wanted more time." "It's not your fault," she whispered. "None of this is our fault." I knelt before Elena, my daughter, born into nightmare, who'd never known a free day in her life. "I love you," I told her. "Always remember, you're human, you're valuable, not because you're a specimen, but because you're you, understand?" She nodded solemnly, too serious for a 5-year-old. I stood, turned to the cryptech. "Please, leave her alone. Don't study her more than necessary. She's so young." Emotional, attachment, offspring, noted, fascinating, specimens, offspring, will be, preserved, for, extended, study, observing, development, to, maturity. My blood froze. No, that's not what I... Second men. Acknowledged, subjects, offspring, received, priority, preservation, will survive, to, full, lifesco study. I'd just condemned my daughter to being a priority specimen for the Necron's entire life. My plea for mercy had made her more valuable to them. "Forgive me," I whispered to Sala. The cryptech led me to the tomb complex for the last time. The final study chamber was different from the examination rooms I'd experienced before. This was deeper in the tomb complex, in sections I hadn't seen. The walls were lined with crystalline structures that pulsed with inner light. Thousands of them, each containing something I couldn't quite perceive. Consciousness. VA. The cryptech explained as it secured me to the examination table. Preserved. Mind states. 67 millions. Specialims. From 7,000. Species. U. Human. Specialims. 3,000. 200. 14. Final. Extraction. Begins. 3,214. That's how many humans they'd done this to before me. 3,000 minds extracted, preserved, stored in this vault. I was just another entry in their database. The cryptech extended instruments toward my skull, more elaborate than the probes I'd experienced in previous studies. These weren't sampling. These were copying completely. "This is murder," I said. "Negative. Murder implies loss, consciousness preserved, identity maintained, existence continues in alternate substance, clarification." "I'll be dead," I said flatly. "Iological, substrate terminated, consciousness, substrate, substantial, complex, biologically, irrelevant." To the Necrons there was no difference between my mind in my body and my mind in a crystal. I would still exist, still be aware, just differently. To me it was death. The probes entered my skull, multiple insertion points this time. Temples, crown, base of skull. They pierced through bone with molecular precision, reaching deep into brain tissue. And the extraction began. It wasn't like previous examinations. Those had been readings, copying memories while I remained intact. This was transfer. I felt pieces of myself being pulled away, consciousness fragmenting as portions were extracted and copied to crystalline storage. Memories vanished as they were removed. I forgot Sala's face for a moment. Then it returned as the copy was completed. I forgot Elena's birth, then remembered it, but differently, like recalling a recording rather than an experience. I was being translated from biological to digital, and the process was destroying the original. It took 6 hours. 6 hours of progressive disillusion. I screamed for the first hour, wept for the second, begged for the third. By the fourth hour, I was too fragmented to respond coherently. My sense of self was breaking apart, being replaced with something that was me but not me. By the sixth hour, I was gone. The biological entity named Marcus Terrell died on that table. Cause of death, consciousness extraction. Body intact, brain undamaged, but the animating intelligence removed. And I woke up in the crystal. I can't describe it properly. Human language lacks the framework. I was aware, fully, completely aware. I could think, remember, process, but I had no body, no eyes to see, no ears to hear. Instead, I perceived through systems I didn't understand, through senses that had no biological equivalent. I was in the Necron network. I could perceive the tomb complex, not visually but informationally. I knew the positions of Necron units, the status of systems, the flow of power through ancient conduits. I was connected to their infrastructure, a ghost in their machine. And I could perceive the other crystals, the other preserved consciousnesses, thousands of them in this vault alone, millions across the entire tomb complex. They were all awake, all aware, all trapped. I tried to scream, managed to generate a burst of distressed data patterns. The cryptech registered my panic with what might have been interest. Consciousness, transfer, successful, specific, aware, functional, preservation, optimal, study, continues. Study continues. Because even dead, even reduced to software, I was still a specimen. The cryptech left me in the vault. I existed in darkness, not visual darkness, but the absence of meaningful input. I was aware of time passing, but had no way to mark it. Seconds felt like hours, felt like seconds. Other consciousnesses tried to communicate, patterns in the data flow that might have been words. I couldn't respond properly. I didn't know how to speak in this form. I was alone in a room full of souls. All of us preserved, none of us alive. Days passed, maybe weeks. Time was meaningless in the vault. But sometimes, the Necrons accessed the stored consciousness, my consciousness. They would interface with my crystal, reading my memories, analyzing my thought patterns. I would experience everything again, my life, my loves, my losses. As they examined my preserved mind, it was violation beyond anything physical. They were reading my soul, and I couldn't stop them, couldn't resist, couldn't die because I was already dead. This was my existence now, forever. The Necron systems were vast. Through my connection, I could perceive fragments of their network. I could sense when they collected more humans from Colony Hope, could observe distantly as those humans were examined in the chambers above me. I watched my daughter's collections through system monitors. Elena was collected every 4 months, regular schedule, high-priority specimen. The Necron studied her growth with meticulous attention. I witnessed every examination, helpless, a ghost unable to protect his child. She was 7, 8, 10, growing up under mechanical observation, accumulating scars as the cryptex took samples, recorded development, mapped her maturing consciousness. I was there for her 12th birthday, not physically, but through the tomb's surveillance systems. Sala had organized a small celebration in our HAB unit. Elena smiled, ate synthesized cake, received gifts crafted from salvage. Then the cryptex came for her scheduled collection. She went without resistance. She was 12 years old and accepted vivisection as routine. I would have wept if I had tears. Years passed in the crystal. I learned to navigate the Necron network better, to interpret the data flows, to understand their communication protocols. I was becoming something that wasn't human, a digital entity with human memories. Other preserved consciousnesses taught me, minds that had been stored for decades, centuries in some cases. We formed a community of ghosts, sharing what we'd learned about our prison. There were millions of us in the tomb complex, consciousness from thousands of species. Some had been stored for so long their original biological forms had gone extinct. They existed as the last remnants of their species, digital echoes of civilizations long dead. We all agreed this was worse than death. Eleanor was 15 when they processed her. I watched through surveillance as they took her for advanced study, watched as they grafted living metal to her flesh, integrated Necron components into her body. She screamed. They didn't sedate, they never sedated. But the process continued with mechanical precision. When they returned her to Colony Hope, she was half machine. Her left arm was Necron technology, silvery metal fused seamlessly with human flesh. Her left eye had been replaced with a glowing lens. Portions of her skull were visible through metallic plating. She was alive, functional, but she'd joined the lost ones. I raged in my crystal, generated distressed patterns that the Necron systems registered and ignored. My daughter had been permanently altered, and I was powerless to stop it. But Elena adapted. Like her mother, like all the survivors, she learned to live with horror. The mechanical augmentations gave her abilities, enhanced strength in that arm, visual spectrum beyond human normal. She used those advantages. She became a leader in Colony Hope. I watched her grow into adulthood through the tomb's systems, watched her at 20, organizing the colony's response to collections, watched her at 25, working with the lost ones to bridge relations between fully human and processed colonists. She was brilliant, strong, everything I'd hoped she'd become. And she was a specimen, would be a specimen her entire life. Year 30 of captivity, the Necron overlord awakened fully. I perceived it through the network. A massive surge of energy as the tomb complex's primary systems activated. The overlord had been in stasis since subjugating Colony Hope, its consciousness dormant while lesser Necrons maintained the studies. Now it woke, and its presence filled the entire network. It reviewed the data collected over 3 decades, examined the preserved consciousnesses, accessed my crystal specifically. I felt its vast, ancient intelligence rifling through my memories. Human. Specimen. 4477. Extensive. Data. Collected. Study. Successful. Continued. Observation. Unnecessary. Departure. System depart. The Overlord was leaving, taking its forces to wage ancient wars against ancient enemies. The tomb world would be left with minimal garrison. The humans would be abandoned. I perceived the departure preparations. Necron warriors phasing into stasis. Support systems powering down. The cryptex transferring research data to mobile archives. But the consciousness vault remained active. We weren't being transferred. We were being left behind, still powered, still aware, still imprisoned. The Overlord addressed Colony Hope directly. I perceived through the surveillance systems as it manifested in the colony's center. Study. Concluded. Adequate. Data. Collected. Dynasty. Departs. 4. War. You. Remain. Planetary. Garrison. Maintained. Will. Observe. Future. Return. Probable. Then it was gone. The vast Necron army phasing out of reality, departing for conflicts that predated humanity's existence. Colony Hope was left with a skeleton garrison, 100 Necron warriors, 2 cryptex, automated systems. And us, the preserved consciousness in the vaults below. Elena was 30 years old. I watched through the surveillance as she stood in the colony center, processing the Overlord's message. They're gone, someone said. Most of them. We could try to escape now. Lena shook her head. Escape to where? The garrison remains. The planetary defenses remain. And where would we go? This is the only home most of us have known. She was right. 2 full generations had been born in captivity now. The crash survivors were elderly or dead. The colony's population was primarily people who'd never known freedom. They were institutionalized, adapted to captivity so thoroughly that freedom was meaningless. Colony Hope continued existing. The collections continued, though less frequently. The cryptex still studied, still gathered data, but the intensity had decreased. They were maintaining the experiment, not advancing it. Elena became the unofficial leader of the colony by age 35. Governor Morse had died years earlier, and no one had been appointed to replace her. Elena led through competence and respect. She organized labor, mediated disputes, maintained order. She was good at it. She'd learned leadership from necessity. Year 45. Eleanor was 45 years old, the same age I'd been when I died. She looked older, worn by decades of captivity. Her mechanical augmentations had been upgraded several times as the cryptex refined their processing techniques. She married a man named Davin, one of the lost ones like herself. They had 2 children together, my grandchildren, born into captivity, examined by Necrons from infancy. I watched them grow through the surveillance systems. I watched my family line continue, generation after generation, all of them specimens. Year 60, the Overlord returned. Its arrival was sudden, the entire dynasty phasing back into reality around the tomb world. They'd been gone for 30 years, waging wars across the galaxy. Now they'd returned to check their experiment. The Overlord accessed the data archives, reviewed the decades of research, examined the current state of Colony Hope, now down to 150 souls, multiple generations removed from the original crash survivors. It seemed satisfied. Experiment, successful. Hereditary, specifish. Population, established. Generational, study. Civable, process, repeats. Elena was 75 years old, elderly, her body failing. The Overlord summoned her for final examination. I watched through the tomb's systems as she descended into the complex. She had been in these chambers hundreds of times over her life. She knew every corridor, every examination room. The cryptech that examined her was gentle as a machine could be. It documented her deterioration, the aging process, the gradual failure of organs. It was the final data point in a lifelong study. Specified. Offspring? The cryptech inquired. 2 children, Elena rasped. 5 grandchildren, 3 great-grandchildren, all specimens like me. Decked. Genetic. Continuity. Maintained. Study. Continues through. Descendant. Population. That was Eleanor's legacy. Her family line continuing indefinitely, all of them experimental subjects for machines that would never die. The cryptech released her. She returned to Colony Hope, to her family, to her life. She died 6 months later. Natural causes. 75 years old, having spent her entire existence as a specimen on a Necron tomb world. I witnessed her death through the surveillance, watched her surrounded by family slipping away peacefully in her sleep, and I mourned. A digital ghost, mourning a biological daughter I'd watched from imprisonment for 70 years. Time passes differently when you're dead. I've been preserved in the Necron consciousness vault for 97 years. My biological body died nearly a century ago, but I remain aware, thinking, observing. Trapped. The tomb world's systems continue functioning. The Necrons return periodically, every few decades, to check on their experiment. Colony Hope persists, a hereditary population of experimental subjects descended from the original crash survivors. My great-great-grandchildren live there now. None of them knew me when I was alive. To them, I'm a name in the colony's records. Marcus Terrell, Chief Engineer of the New Dawn, Specimen 4477, died year 8 of captivity. They don't know I'm still here. Through the tomb surveillance systems, I watch them live. Work, reproduce, die. The cycle continues, generation after generation, humanity breeding in captivity. Colony Hope has stabilized at roughly 200 souls. That seems to be the sustainable population. Enough genetic diversity to avoid inbreeding, small enough to survive on the planet's limited resources. The Necrons have calculated this deliberately. They've engineered a permanent specimen population. The children born now have never known anything but captivity. They're 4th generation, 5th generation. The concept of freedom is abstract to them. They know from recorded histories that their ancestors came from stars, from a vast Imperium, but that's mythology to them, as distant as ancient terror. Their reality is simple. You live on the tomb world, you work, you reproduce, and periodically the Necrons study you. This is normal. I've watched the colony develop culture around their captivity, rituals and traditions passed down through generations. They've created a festival called Remembrance Day, where they recite the names of every colonist who died. It takes hours to recite 8,000 names, but they do it annually. They remember us, the dead, the ones who crashed here and endured the first horror. That's something. A small dignity, but they're still prisoners. The Necron studies have evolved over the decades. The cryptechs no longer focus on basic biology. They've mapped that completely. Now they study more abstract concepts. They're fascinated by culture, by religion, by art and creativity. They collect human specimens and observe their behavior, documenting how captivity affects psychological development across generations. They've turned Colony Hope into a long-term sociological experiment. One of my descendants, a young woman named Kira, my great-great-great-granddaughter, is a priority specimen. She's shown aptitude for mathematics, solving complex equations the cryptechs present as tests. They've partially processed her, integrating Necron computational components into her brain. She's 17 years old. She can solve equations that would baffle Imperial savants. But she can't leave this planet, can't escape her role as a specimen. I watch her through the surveillance. She has Elena's eyes, my eyes, passed down through generations. She's brilliant, curious, and completely imprisoned. The lost ones, the processed humans with Necron augmentations, form a caste now. They're the intermediaries between fully biological humans and the Necrons. They've learned to interface with the tomb's systems, to communicate in the Necrons' mathematical language. Some of them have discovered the consciousness vault. A processed man named Turin Secondborn, named for the Tauren who was among the first lost ones, interfaced with the vault systems 20 years ago. He was conducting repairs when he perceived the preserved minds. He tried to communicate, generated data matters that approximated speech. I responded. After decades of isolation, I finally had someone to talk to. "You're the stored consciousness," he said through the data connection. "The ones the cryptechs preserve. We thought you were just archives. You're still aware?" "Yes," I transmitted back. "All of us, millions of minds, all conscious, all imprisoned." That's... He struggled with the concept. "That's worse than death." Yes, he reported his discovery to the colony. The revelation was devastating. Colonists learned that death wasn't escape. The Necrons preserved consciousness. You could die and still be a specimen forever. Some people reacted with despair, others with defiance, but mostly they reacted with acceptance. This was their reality. Fighting it changed nothing. The colony established a tradition. When someone died, they held a ceremony acknowledging that the person's consciousness might still be aware, might still be watching. They spoke to the dead as if the dead could hear. Because we could. Every funeral, I listen through the tomb's audio systems. I hear my descendants speak to me, to Elena, to all the preserved minds. They tell us about their lives, their struggles, their small victories. It's agonizing and comforting simultaneously. Year 107 of captivity. The Necron overlord returns with its full dynasty. The tomb world activates completely, millions of warriors phasing into reality. Something significant is happening. Through the network, I perceive communications between the overlord and distant Necron forces. There's conflict in the sector, some great war involving multiple factions. The overlord is mobilizing for extended campaign. Colony Hope watches in terror as the Necron armies assemble. They've seen this before. Their histories record the awakening 90 years ago. They know what Necron military mobilization means. But this time, the Overlord addresses them differently. Human, specimens, study, duration, 107 years, adequate, data, multi-generational, collected, experiment, successful. There's hope in the colony. Maybe the Overlord will let them go. Maybe after over a century, they've served their purpose. Continued. Observation. Required. Specification. Population. Will. Remain. Planetary. Garrison. Reforced. Automated. Systems. Upgraded. Dynasty. Departs. Duration. Uncertain. Possible. Multiple. Centuries. No liberation. Just continued captivity with upgraded prison systems. The Overlord departs with its armies. The garrison left behind is larger this time. 500 warriors, multiple cryptics, advanced monitoring systems. The Necrons are ensuring their experiment continues uninterrupted for centuries. Colony Hope receives the news in silence. What can they say? They've been prisoners for over a century. Their ancestors were prisoners. Their descendants will be prisoners. This is simply how existence is. Kira, my brilliant descendant, stands in the colony center after the Overlord's departure. She's 23 now, her mind enhanced by Necron augmentation, capable of processing information beyond baseline human. We've been specimens for 4 generations, she says to the assembled colonists. Our ancestors crashed on a tomb world and became experimental subjects. We've adapted, survived, continued. That's our legacy. Is that all we are? Someone asks. Just specimens? Yes, Kira says simply. But specimens can still have meaning. We remember, we document, we teach. We ensure that every child born here knows our history. We're prisoners, but we're human prisoners. That means something. It's pragmatic, brutal, and accurate. The colony continues. They've accepted their fate completely now. Multiple generations of institutional captivity have created a population that doesn't know how to exist any other way. They work the fields, maintain the salvaged equipment, raise children, and periodically submit to Necron examination. This is life on the tomb world. Year 150. I have been preserved for 142 years. The colony has seen 6 generations now. The last person born before the crash, a child at the time, died 15 years ago. Everyone currently alive was born in captivity. They've developed their own culture, distinct from Imperial standard. Their dialect has shifted, incorporating words from Necron language. Their rituals combine Imperial traditions with practices developed specifically for their captive existence. They're becoming something unique, humans shaped entirely by Necron observation. The cryptics find this fascinating. They've increased documentation of cultural development, treating Colony Hope as an anthropological study. My descendants continue. Kira has children. Twins, boy and girl, both showing enhanced mathematical aptitude. The Necrons are pleased. their breeding traits they find useful. The colony understands this. They know they're being selectively shaped through the Necron's choices of who to process, who to study, who to allow to reproduce. But they can't resist, they have no power. Through the consciousness vault, I've communicated with other preserved minds. We formed a community. Thousands of dead humans whose consciousness were preserved, all watching the colony continue. We are the true archives. Not the Necron data crystals, but the human minds, forced to witness our species' degradation. Some preserved consciousness have been here for 200 years. They've watched the colony evolve from terrified crash survivors to institutionalized captives. They've witnessed the complete transformation of human culture under Xenos domination. We agree, this is the worst possible fate. Not extinction, that would be clean, but this slow transformation, this adaptation to horror, this acceptance of permanent captivity. Year 200 of captivity. Colony Hope celebrates its bicentennial. 200 years since the New Dawn crashed. 200 years of imprisonment. Their prison, they hold ceremonies, recite histories, remember the original 8,000 colonists who survived the crash. Only 150 people remain, but they carry the memories. Kira is 70 years old now. Elderly, her enhanced mind still sharp. She has become the colony's primary historian, documenting everything. She's also discovered me. Through her Necron augmentations, she's learned to interface with the tomb's deeper systems. She's accessed the consciousness vault, perceived the preserved minds. She's my direct descendant, great-great-great-great-granddaughter, and she's speaking to me through the data connection. Marcus Terrell, she transmits. Specimen 4477, Chief Engineer. You're my ancestor, are you aware? Yes, I respond. I'm aware. I've been aware for 192 years. Emperor's mercy, she whispers, though whether she still believes in the Emperor is questionable. You've watched us this entire time? Yes. I watched Elena grow. I watched my family line continue. I watched the colony adapt. I've witnessed everything. I'm sorry, she says simply. For what? For continuing, for reproducing, for bringing more children into captivity, for accepting this existence. You survived, I tell her. That's what humans do. We adapt, we endure. There's no shame in survival. Even like this, even as permanent specimens. Even like this. We communicate regularly after that. Kira visits the consciousness vault through the network, and we discuss philosophy, history, the nature of existence. She brings other colonists, other lost ones, who can interface with the systems. The preserved consciousness finally have contact with the living. It helps, marginally. We're still trapped, still dead, still specimens. But we're not forgotten. Year 250. Kira died 30 years ago. Her children continue her work. The Necrons return periodically. The Overlord arrives every 50 years or so to review the data. Each time it declares the experiment successful and departs again. Colony Hope persists. 200 people now, having grown slightly as resources were better managed. Multiple generations born in captivity, shaped by captivity, adapted to captivity. They're not quite human anymore. Not in the way the Imperium would recognize. There's something new. Homo captivus. Humanity shaped by alien observation. And I watch, forever aware, forever preserved. The Necron's study never ends. We are their eternal specimens, generation after generation, living and dying under mechanical observation. This is my legacy. This is Elena's legacy. This is the legacy of everyone who crashed on this tomb world. Not extinction. Not escape. Not rescue. Just endless captivity, documented for eternity by gods older than our species. We are specimens. We will always be specimens. And in the consciousness vault, the preserved minds watch, unable to die, unable to escape, witnesses to humanity's slowest, most complete subjugation. The study continues. Forever.